everybody. Welcome to the Integrating Scratch webinar series. This is the first part of four-part webinar series that we'll be doing over the next 4 weeks to introduce you to Scratch. Let me just say hello. Hi, this is Haruna from the Digital Learning team.
Hi, Nick Gonzalez. How are you?
Hi, this is Rashmi.
Just a couple of housekeeping stuff. We are going to be using Google Classroom as a landing page for information and resources. Let me just show you what that looks like. You should have all logged into Google Classroom already. This is today's post, webinar link, today's meet link, and we have a one-pager for each week. If you go into the About page, you will see a little bit more information about the course as well as additional resources. And Google Classroom is also where you submit all of your assignments and where all the details will be posted. Some of you already completed the pre-webinar task. And so you can see, I see that 8 people have done it, 11 have not. Although I know that more of you have done it because I've gotten more responses in the Google form. So just make sure you click on Mark as Done when you finish doing a task in Google Classroom. A little bit more housekeeping. So the webinars will air every Monday at 4. You do not have to tune in live. The webinars are automatically recorded in YouTube, and you can play it back as many times as you want, anytime after the live webinar. The advantage to seeing it live is that you can give us feedback and ask questions live as we're going, and that's through the Today's Meet. So the Today's Meet link is in your Google Classroom. We'll have a different link every week. Today's Meet is basically a text chat where you can just send us questions, and then one of us will be monitoring that channel and giving you feedback and giving you answers, as well as we could also be addressing it on the video if we think it's something that should be addressed to everybody. Now, please note that there is about a 15-second delay between us and the video. So if you ask a question on today's Meet, we may not get the question for about 15 seconds. So just know that there may be a delay. There will be weekly homework assignments, and you need to complete all of them in order to get your PDPs. So just know that. And the Today's Meet link is going to be at the bottom of the slide on each slide in case you lose it for some reason. So just before we get into Scratch, we want to talk a little bit about why we need to do computer science in schools. And there's a big momentum now including computer science in K-12 education. President Obama announced back in February that he is pushing for a new Computer Science for All initiative to bring computer science to all K-12 schools. And in response to that, and even before that happened, a lot of states and districts are moving to make computer science a graduation requirement. It hasn't happened in Boston yet, but Chicago was the latest in a big city to join the trend, and as well as Rhode Island, who just announced a couple of weeks ago that they're making computer science a graduation requirement in high schools. And right now, Massachusetts is rewriting its digital literacy standards into digital literacy and computer science standards. So computer science is becoming a part of the standards. Now, currently, Massachusetts, those are voluntary standards, and it is not a graduation requirement, but definitely they're making a conscious effort to include computer science in our schools. Those standards are currently in draft form, and it's open for public review. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we welcome you to take a look at it and provide feedback on that.
So yeah, given the momentum that computer science is gathering, it's more than likely that within the coming years, computer science and digital literacy are going to make it into the curriculum here with BPS.
And we hope so.
Yeah, we hope so. Yes.
This was a survey that was done by code.org during the Hour of Code. And this was some of the statistics that was shared during the Hour of Code, and it's also in the CS for All initiatives by the White House. So 9 out of 10 parents said in this survey that they want computer science taught at their schools. However, only 1 in 4 schools are teaching it right now. So there's definitely a disconnect there. And that just highlights the need for more computer science. And I have 2 children in public schools, and I definitely one of those 9 people. I definitely want this taught in schools. And I think Rashmi, you can agree too. She's got kids coming up into schools, and I'm sure she can agree to that.
And I don't have any kids, but I have had students before, and yes, I definitely think computer science is integral to all of our students' futures.
Right. And to that effect, I so completely agree with you, Haruna. As Haruna mentioned and Nick mentioned about the incoming computer science standards, we have them growing in from grades K to 12, which is an exciting thing as parents, as educators for us as well. So looking for diversity as other school districts are integrating CS into curriculums. And this is also an effort that we are putting together for interdisciplinary integration.
And this is another statistic that was shared by code.org during the Hour of Code. By 2018, over half of all STEM jobs are projected to be in computer science. But we're not producing enough graduates with this kind of skills. And especially in the underrepresented groups, such as females and students of color, we need to do a lot more to teach computer science in those groups as well. And not just in the job market, but computational thinking has really gained attention as a fundamental skill. It's not just for computer scientists, it's not just for programmers, but it's a fundamental problem-solving skill that helps everybody in all areas. And the vision statement of the Massachusetts Digital Literacy and Computer Science Standards really states that. And this is just an excerpt. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you look at the parts in blue, they do say that they need to apply digital literacy and computer science to their chosen interest and career fields. So it's really not limited to what career they're going into. Any field they go into, there needs to be an understanding of computational thinking and computer science. So that's kind of what we're laying down. That's why we're doing this. And anything to add to that?
No, I agree. The need for CS goes beyond just computer science. It's actually, yeah, the whole computational thinking movement can be applied to every content area. You know, I have a background in the humanities and the social sciences, and yes, computational thinking can very much be applied to the humanities and social sciences quite easily. It's logic, it's creativity, it's it's thinking with steps. So again, computational thinking is a must, not just for people who want to go into computer science, but it can be applied across in any school and in any content area.
Absolutely. And to that point, I also want to give kudos to Dr. Janet Wing, who was the first professor at Carnegie Mellon who came up with the idea of computational thinking. This is a woman scientist and engineer, computer scientist who brought in the thinking which is now spearleading the moment for the need of computer science and integrating computational thinking into all aspects of curricula. It's also, sort of breaking it down, but recognizing how important it is, just like reading, just like literacy, how this can then be integrated at every level, at every grade level, and going forward.
And on that note, one last thing. Today is Pi Day, so I just want to wish everybody a happy Pi Day. One of the reasons we started this computer science scratch thing on this day is because it's Pi Day. So have some pie. Watch the movie Pi.
A life of Pi.
Yes. Watch the Life of Pi.
Okay, so back to computer science. How might computer science look like in K through 12? This slide is based on digital literacy and computer science standards, the Massachusetts version. But these are just some of the skills that should be covered at each grade span. And notice how in the early grades we're not even talking about coding and coding with Java or anything advanced like that. All we need, especially at the early level, is for kids to understand sequencing and writing, understanding the instructions come in a sequence, and using block-based tools. And then as they get older and older, they start to learn more sophisticated programming concepts, and ending high school with some knowledge of text-based languages. And just to become more specific, here are some of the tools and languages that are available for that. It's a lot of stuff, but right now the Scratch course that we're covering is this, it's represented by this green block here, which spans from elementary all the way to high. So it really applies to anybody in about 3rd grade and up for the Scratch tool. So without further ado, we're going to jump into Scratch. So I'm assuming that everybody has made an account already. If you haven't, don't worry about it. We'll get to that later. When you first go to scratch.mit.edu, this is what you see. Yours may look a little different depending on what featured projects and things you get when you log in. You have tabs going across the top. There is a Join Scratch. So if you haven't made an account yet, click on Join Scratch and you can join, but don't do it now. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Go ahead and sign in. So Scratch is a graphical programming tool that was developed at MIT. It's really meant to teach young students coding principles. And over 10 million users in 150 different countries are using Scratch right now, and it's available in more than 40 languages. And we'll show you the different language options later. But this is really powerful that it comes in so many different languages. It's great for English language learners, and it can also be used in foreign language classes if you use the different language options. And students can explain their projects to their parents, even if their parents didn't really speak English. So this is really great. The graphical interface is, this block programming concept is really important in early younger students learning programming, because you don't have to worry so much about all the nitty-gritty details of programming. When you're programming in text, where you put a comma or a semicolon or a bracket, or those little tiny details make a huge difference in the code, and one missing comma could really throw off your code. And that makes it, it kind of makes learning the code a lot more stressful and not as fun. But with the blocks, you don't have to worry so much about the syntax, and you can just learn the concept of coding without going into all the little details. Having said that, even with blocks, Scratch is not really recommended for pre-readers, just because all the blocks have text on them to describe what the blocks do. So if you're working with pre-reading students, like kindergarten students, then Scratch Junior or other specific tools developed for pre-readers are a better option for you. Scratch is free, and it works on pretty much any computer with internet, including Chromebooks. And it also comes in an offline version, so you can actually download it and install it on your computer, PC or Mac, if you don't have reliable internet in your room. And it's really a great way to integrate coding into any discipline. So as an example, kind of almost an example of what we'll be doing today, rather than making a PowerPoint presentation in your class, which is a very typical thing a lot of teachers do, having students do PowerPoint presentations. You can have students make an interactive animation or like an interactive infographic using code in Scratch, which is very similar to making a presentation, but it does incorporate coding principles, and it's more fun and it becomes more interactive. So we'll do a little bit of that today, a little beginning of that today, and we'll build on it as we go to next week and on. So now that we have all signed in, oh, one more little note. You don't have to sign in to use Scratch. So even if you don't have an account, you can still use Scratch. The only thing is you won't be able to save your projects or share your projects. So if somebody wants to try it out without signing in, that's not a problem either. But if you do want to save your projects, you need to sign in. Okay, so back to this site. On the main screen, I'm not going to go through every single thing, but the Create tab is where you're going to make your projects. Don't click on it now. I will get into that in a couple of minutes. Explore will show you projects that people have shared. And there is a feature called Remix in Scratch, where you can take an existing program that somebody else has shared publicly and then reprogram it and modify it. So Explore is for people who are interested in doing that. Discuss is a forum where you can discuss, it's basically a discussion forum and Q&A section. And then I do want to point you to the Help screen. The Help tab will give you more than enough information that you ever want to know about Scratch, including Scratch Wiki, which is a great place to just learn about different commands. If you have any question about how Scratch works, you can go into Scratch Wiki, and it's pretty thorough. This is also where you download the offline versions of the program. There is 2 different versions, 1.4 and Scratch 2. Scratch 2 is similar to the version that we're using today online. So again, if you have unreliable internet in your classroom, you can download and install it onto your computer and still use it that way. Final piece here, Scratch Ed. Scratch Ed is an online community for educators. So there's a lot of resources there. People have put up curriculum. There's a whole discussion forum just for educators. So we encourage you to take a look at that as well. And on the right-hand side of the tabs, this little folder with the S on it, or actually, if I go back to the home screen, it's not going to have an S on it, but this little folder next to your name is where you see all of your stuff. Now, you may not see all this much stuff because if you're new to Scratch and you haven't made a program yet, but this is all of my programs that I have made already. So if you create a program and you save a program and you don't know where it went, this is where it would be. It would be under my stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create to go into the editor. So this is the main feature of the Scratch website. This is where you really build your program. This Untitled 11 is the title. It comes up as by default, but you can just type in something else to change to a new title. This screen here where the cat is, this is called your stage. This is basically, so let me just backtrack one step. So Scratch was designed for creating animations and games. And if you think about animations and video games, there's always a screen, like your TV screen, where the action happens. So this is where that happens. So when you're designing a game or animation, this would be your screen. And it's called a stage. The cat here is called a sprite, if you look at the bottom here. And a sprite is like a character or an object within your animation or a game. So your animation or the game consists of a background and a sprite, and you could have multiple sprites. You could have as many sprites as you like, or you could have 0 sprites if you want to just have the background. So again, sprite is the character. Now you have this tab called script. Script is another word for a program or a code, and this tab here is like a palette of available commands. And each block underneath is a command. Now when you're ready to make a program, you drag a command out to the right side and then start building your programs that way. Don't get into too much programming yet. In addition to the sprite having a script, so each sprite is going to have its own script that defines its own behavior. So for example, if you had a game with a cat and a ball, the cat would have its own script to define the cat's behavior, and the ball might have its own script because they're going to behave different. The ball might just be rolling, the cat might be running. So you have different scripts defining each sprite's behavior. Now, same thing with the stage. You could have a script for the stage. Now, that might sound a little bit weird because the background doesn't really move, but you can actually program the stage with different backdrop, which means you can have a different background. So for example, if you have a game, you might have a background of outer space for one part of the game. And then when that stage is over, maybe you have another background with
pirate ships.
Pirate ships, there we go. So you can have a different setting for your animation or your game depending on what backdrop you have. So you can program that using a script for the backdrop or the stage. So this is going to start to make more sense as you really do the program. So right. I'm sure I'm confusing everybody, but don't worry too much about it yet. That's that. And then there are some options to save your file. Now, Scratch, if you're working in the online version of Scratch, everything is saved automatically. So as soon as you start creating a new program, it's already saved. So you don't really have to worry too much about saving in Scratch. If you want to save as a copy, and so that you have a copy and you can, continue to work on it and have an original copy left, you can do that as well. There's also option to download or upload from your computer. This is great if you have the offline version installed on your computer, and if you had worked on a project on your computer offline, and then you would upload it into your account, you would use this link. Edit button, there are undo options. So just keep that in mind. If you somehow accidentally delete something, there's always undo. This is the language options that I briefly mentioned before. There are tons of different languages available. And let's say we wanted to do Scratch in Espanol. You click on that, and what would happen is all of the commands turn into Spanish, which is really cool. So if you've already had a program already built, all of that would change as well. So the program itself wouldn't change, just the language would change. So for example, if a student had programmed something and then they wanted to show it to their parents who didn't quite read English very well, you can switch it to Spanish and they can still explain it in their native tongue. Or if you're using this as a part of a foreign language class, you could have the students program in a foreign language, and that would be.
If I can add something here to Haruna, if you have ESL students or ELLs, yep, it's a great way to check. So if you want to, have them program in English and make sure their programs work, you can actually have them translate it into Spanish or into Portuguese or Haitian Creole and whatnot, French, I'm sorry. And they can check that way as well. So it's really good to use for ELLs as well.
Yes. This icon here on the top left corner puts it in full screen view. So you can watch your animation or play your game in full screen mode. Click again to shrink it back. And then finally, I do want to talk about the share button. The share button is there for you to make your project public. And until you click that, your project is private. Only you can see it. Once you share, anybody with the link can see it, and it will anybody with who's searching for it on the Scratch website can see it. And once it's public, it's also free for anybody to take and remix or modify. They're not going to modify your original program, but it creates a copy on their account for them to modify. So it's very important when you share that you're not sharing any personal information. So if you ever create an animation about yourself, for example, you probably don't want to put in your address and your phone number in there if you plan to share in the future. And make sure when your students are doing this too that they're not sharing any personal information on there or any photograph that they may not want the rest of the world to see. I think that was enough introduction. I think we're going to jump into today's project.
Okay, so you should see, I'm going to go ahead and go to my Scratch account. And just like Haruna said, I'm signed in. Here, I'm ready to go. I want to say a few things before we get started. So this particular Scratch webinar is going to be catering to the humanities, and so I'm going to focus on some social studies activities that you can create with Scratch. However, it's not defined. I'm sorry, it's not particular just to history. You can actually, or social studies. You can do it for ELL, or you can do it for any other class. But today we're going to be focusing on creating a slideshow. So again, this is one of the simpler activities, exercises that you can do on Scratch, and this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to want to tell you the layout of how we're going to go about with these sessions. So each session we're going to cover a different subject area, but it's going to, in terms of Scratch, it's going to get increasingly a little more difficult each session. So this is the most basic Scratch session that we're going to have. And again, it's quite easy. It doesn't involve that many functions. But you'll see as we go into the next session, we're going to go into sprites, and then eventually we'll go into if-then statements and into variables and whatnot. So we're going to, as we progress with the sessions, the Scratch is going to get a little more difficult. Not that much, so it really isn't. One of the things, again, I don't have a computer science background, but again, and I was afraid at the beginning, but again, just get your hands dirty. It's all, you won't ever break Scratch, and if you go in there and just keep an open mind. It's a great way to teach both computer science and content area. So again, moving forward in going through with the sessions, it's going to vary from session to session. Is going to vary in terms of subject area, but it's going to focus on Scratch, and the difficulty is going to get a little bit more it's going to increase as we progress through the sessions.
And just jumping in, if you downloaded the week one-pager from the Google Classroom, it has an overview of what the activity is going to be. So just take a look at that just to kind of help you follow along with Nick.
Alrighty, so the first thing I want to show is the simple slideshow. I'm sorry, it's not going to be a flower project. It's going to be actually, it's going to be the slideshow that you're going to see today in its completed form. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you. I'm going to open up my folder. All right, and I'm going to go to Short Sample Scratch American History. So this is the Stamp Act protest, and you can see the figure on the stick is actually an effigy of a stamp collector. This is a painting of the Boston Massacre that happened in Boston in the 1770s. This is a picture of George Washington leading the colonial army in a battle. And so as you can see, again, really easy, really simple, and you can do this, again, you can do this in various ways. You know, you can simply do this on using Google's presentation, or you can do it on iTunes using, you know, either GarageBand or iPhoto and whatnot, and we understand that. But we want you to take a computer science approach to it. We want you to take a coding approach to it, because you can do, in the end, in the long run, you can do much more using Scratch than you can with those other applications. This is just the root base of it. And again, it's going to get more complex as we move down, as we progress with the series. But and we understand that there are other applications that can do this, but we're taking the CS approach to it, and we're taking the coding approach to again, right here in this case, teaching history. So
we're going to be building on this project for next week and on. So it's very important for you to complete this particular project, although it seems like a roundabout way to make a simple slideshow, but we're going to be building on it next week.
Exactly. Without further ado, let's start creating. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Create button. And one thing, and another thing I have to preface is that, you know, I'm going to show you one way to do this. There are a lot of different ways to do the same thing when you program and use computer science and code. There's a lot of ways to do the same thing, and I'm going to give you my approach. However, if you find a better approach or another approach, please, by all means, use that and let us know about it. So again, I've created my my project, and the first thing I want to do is I want to title my project. So I'm going to call this the American and automatically saves for you. Secondly, what I want to do, well, actually, no, secondly, what I want to do is I want to go down. I'm not going to use sprites in this particular session. The next session we'll use sprites, but this section we're only going to be using backdrops. Okay, so I'm going to go down to my sprite, and I'm going to right-click on my sprite. Okay, and you'll see from here I'm going to go into delete. So I don't want to use my sprite in this one. I'm going to be using sprites later on, but again, today we're only going to be using backdrops. Delete. So you should have a clear stage. Okay. So here's my scripts, here's my backdrops, and here's my sounds. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go to my backdrops. I'm going to click here, and this will pop up right here. You'll see this clear palette, and you'll see many different functions. Don't worry about any of these for right now. What you want to do, the next thing you want to do is go into a folder, and I've already made this folder. That's already on my hard drive. I'm going to open it, and it's on my desktop. My folder's on my desktop, and my folder has my images in it that I'm going to use. Okay, so I'm going to open up my folder, and I'm going to come here to Scratch Training Slides. Right here, you'll see I have all the slides that I'm going to use in my Scratch presentation. Okay, so there's only 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Control or Shift, either or, right? And I'm going to highlight all of them. Okay, make sure all of them are highlighted. You can do it one by one, but it's a lot more difficult and a lot more time consuming. So I'm going to go through all 4, and I'm going to open it. And you'll see that all of my images get dumped into Scratch, right? Now, you can narrate them each. You can delete any of the images that you don't want. You can rearrange them. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to put them in the order that I want them to be seen. All right, so this is my first one. And you'll see when I click on it, that comes up, events that led to the American Revolution. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and change this one out. Right. So I have my second one, which is Stamp Act protest and effigy. I have my Boston Massacre, and I have my Revolutionary War. And I have my first slide.
I just want to show you one more thing.
Mhm.
There is also an option to choose backdrop from library. That is to, there's a bunch of backdrops already in Scratch that you can choose from. You may not need it for this particular project, but if you were making a game or something, you may one of these backdrops may be useful for you.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different. There's a lot of that already
I'm gonna
been pre-selected. Right.
So you can choose from library. What we did was upload from file. You can also import from a camera or take a picture as we program. So if you were gonna create a project introducing yourself, you can take a picture of yourself using the camera on your computer.
Right.
And just import it right into Scratch.
Right. And yeah, and here are all your editing buttons as well if you want to add text and whatnot and lines. One thing to be wary of though is there's no way you can delete stuff that you put onto your slides. So just be careful if you're going to use this to make sure that your first run is the only run, because you can't go back and delete any of the text that you insert or any of the paintings that you insert.
One way around it is to create a copy of the backdrop. So let's say you wanted to use one of this image and put some text overlay on top of it. You can create a copy of it first. So you have two versions of it, and then you start editing one. That way, even if you mess up and need to redo it, you have an original version still there.
Okay. So that's the editing. I mean, again, you can edit it in several different ways, and many different ways around it. But again, the first thing you want to make sure, though, is that that they're all uploaded correctly, or you're using the backdrops that you want, that you have all the ones that you need that uploaded into Scratch, and make sure that you put them in the right order. So I wanted this. This is my first. Backdrop, and I'm gonna make sure that they're all titled correctly, because it's gonna play a role later on when you actually put the programming in. So I'm gonna call this my beginning slide, or my first slide, or intro slide. Scratch saves for you automatically. So once I click off it, it's gonna be called intro slide. And so again, right here you'll see the titles. Have them all in the right area. Stamp Back Protest, Boston Massacre, and Revolutionary War. Okay, so I have them all in order, and those are the orders that I want them in. Next, what I want to do is make some sounds. All right, I want to provide my narration. Now you can do this in several different ways, but what I suggest is to have at least you have 4 slides, so have 4 different sound files, or 4 different sounds to choose from, and you can do that by just pressing the microphone later on. And so I'm going to label this one events that this is my intro slide, so I'm going to label my first one intro slide. And probably the best thing for this is to have a script. I've actually written out my script beforehand, and I'm going to be using it right now to read. But I have it. There's a script, having it either in a Google Doc or in a Word doc. To have your script laid out beforehand, it makes the job much easier. And that's one thing Rona and I didn't really get into is maybe we should have talked about it a little bit more, is to really plan before you actually start doing your work on Scratch. Know what you want to do beforehand, do the thinking beforehand, and then start to use the tool. And so I've created this, I've created my script, and I'm going to start with it, and I'm going to record myself I'm going to record the narration for the first slide. Okay, so I'm going to come here, I'm going to go to, I change the sound from pop to intro slide, and I'm going to look on my paper, and I'm going to read my first narration. And it's going to record me. I'm going to press allow. Welcome to our webinar on the events leading up to the American Revolution. So right here you can see that I can, it has my voice registered here, and I can repeat it. I can play it back to myself to make sure that it sounds correct or everything's fine. Welcome to our webinar on the events leading up to the American Revolution. Okay, so it's fine. It sounds fine. I said webinar, but I shouldn't have. I think I'll do a presentation. Presentation sounds a little better. So I'm gonna, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna come over. I'm gonna get over this. I'm gonna go to delete, and I'm gonna delete the whole thing, and I'm gonna do it again. Welcome to my presentation on the events leading up to the American Revolution. That's my first narration. Now I'm going to go to my second narration. All right, and I'm going to go back to my second slide, switch it from backdrops and go back to sound so I can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to press recording 1, and again, this is my stand back protest. And again, you can choose intro slide or slide number 1, slide number 2, slide number 3. It's up to you. I'm just putting stand back protest slide because this is what I'm going to be speaking about. And I'm going to record my second narration. Here we see the protest crowds for the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was one of the most protested taxes in the pre-revolutionary colonies in the 1700s. In this image, we can see the crowds holding an effigy of a Stamp Act tax collector. Taxes like this led to a lot of colonist discontent and fostered revolt among them. And again, I can check here to check the sound, and you can see the silence here. These are the silent parts in my actual voice. Right? I think I'll just leave it the way it is. So I'm going to go on to narration number 3. Actually, first I'm going to go to my backdrops, and I'm going to go to the Boston Massacre backdrop, which is my third slide, and I'm going to go back to sounds. I'm going to change this to my Boston. I'm going to record myself, and this is my third slide narration. In this slide, we see another event that led to even more discontent among the colonists. This is the Boston Massacre, and it happened in front of what is the Old State House today on March 5th, 1770. 5 people were killed when British soldiers fired into an unruly, unarmed crowd. Though the soldiers were put on trial, they were ultimately found not guilty for murder. And let's go to the fourth and final slide. And change this to my Revolutionary War or Revolutionary Battle slide. I'm going to go back to sounds, change this to Revolutionary. And I'm going to record my final narration for my fourth slide. Here we see General George Washington leading a charge in a battle during the American Revolution. Note the different types of soldier in the Army. There are militiamen holding farming tools as weapons and mounted officers such as George Washington. Okay, so now I have all 4 of my slide narrations. They're ready to go. Runa?
And there are also a lot of sound effects built in that you can add into your project by adding from library, just like you had the built-in backdrops. So there are a lot of, these are mostly just different sound effects. So let's say like if you want a gunshot to go off during your slideshow to go along with your Boston Massacre, you could probably find it in here. Or there's like crowd cheering, and there's also a bunch of different kinds of sound effects. So I encourage you to use those as well. And if you don't want to record your own sound, you can take sound from there and use it on your project too.
Okay, and so we have my backdrops and my sounds all ready to go. Okay, and so it's important to note that all 4 of my slides have times on them because these are going to play a role in our actual presentation. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to my backdrops, right? Make sure they're all in order. And then I'm going to go to my scripts. Okay, and the first thing I want to do is I will go to my my events. Okay, we're just going to be using the green flag to start the program, to start the actual code from running. So the first thing we want to do, again, is use the green flag in our events blocks. So I'm just going to take 1, I'm going to take 2. 1's going to be for our sounds, and 1 is going to be for our actual switching of the backdrops. Okay, so we're going to focus on sounds first.
And that little green flag block basically means whatever you connect to this block, everything that comes under it will happen as soon as you click on the green flag. And it's just a good practice to start a program with that, so that you just click on this flag to start the program and everything starts at the same time.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to look at our sounds first, right? So I'm going to go to we're going to go to sounds,
And this is going to be under this, would you say that's a magenta or puce or violet color? I'm not quite sure, but it's purple in nature. And you're going to go to sound, and you're going to click on it. Okay. And we're going to go to this first, and I actually selected the wrong ones, I'm sorry. So we're doing the same thing, except we're going to connect on the second. We're going to grab the second command, not the first one. So I'm going to click the first one. This is until it's done. So it's going to play this particular sound until it finishes, and that's what we need. So again, it's the first. We're going to start with the intro slide, and I'm going to grab another one. And it's going to play this intro slide sound until it's done.
The difference between the first, just the play sound versus the play sound until done, is the play sound will start playing the sound clip and move on to the next block as soon as it starts playing. So if you have two different play sound blocks strung next to each other, you'll pretty much only hear the second one, because the first one will start playing and the second one will start playing right away. So if you do until done, it'll start playing the clip and wait until it's completely done with that clip before moving on to the next block.
All right. So if I had just plugged in the first one, they would have all played at the same time, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So again, my bad. So we have all our sounds, all of our sounds in order, and now we're going to have to go for our looks. Now we have to go for go into our actual slides. We have the sound already done. Now we have the slides. Okay, so we're going to go over here into, we have events. We have our green flag already there. Let's go to switch backdrop to. Right? And so as soon as I press that green flag, it's going to go directly to my first intro slide. Right? And then I'm going to go over here to control. Right? And it's going to give it, as soon as it's done, right, it's going to have it wait. And I'm going to give it, now this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, okay? So we want it to switch, the backdrop to switch to the first slide, but we also want it to wait until it's done speaking to switch to the next one. So I'm going to go to my sound and make sure the sound, and here, these are the seconds that it's going to wait until it switches to the next one. So I'm going to go to my sounds and check out the time on my first sound. All right, so we see right here on my intro slide, it's 5.85 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to probably give it about 6 seconds, I think, and then I'll let it switch. So I'll come back at 5.85 seconds. So I'm going to come back to my scripts and change this to 6 seconds. So that way, the backdrops won't switch until it's done. There's enough time for the first sound to play all the way through. Okay, so I'm going to go to then after that, I'm going to go to my second slide. All right, which is, again, Stamp Back, Protest, and Effigy. And then I have to go back to my sounds again to see how long this has to run. So right here, you can see my second sound is, or my second narration is 20.06 seconds. So I'm going to put that for about 20 seconds. So the next control, my next wait is going to be about, again, let's make sure the sound, again, it's 20.06 seconds. So I'm going to change that to about 21 seconds. We want to give it time. Okay, and again, I'm going to switch my backdrop again. Okay, so again, I switched to my third, Boston Massacre, so because that's my third one, and I'm going to go ahead and look at my sounds to see how much it is. So it's 21.26 seconds, so I'm going to put about 22 seconds in there. Let's make sure, again, the sound is 21 seconds, 22 seconds. And go back to the looks. And the last one, which is 13.60 seconds. So I'll put that for about 14 seconds. And again, it's not going to come up perfect the first time, but sometimes you'll have to just fiddle with it just a little bit. let's see how this looks and see how it sounds. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try this out for the first time. Okay, we'll see if anything. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to go ahead and press the green flag. Welcome to my presentation on the events leading up to the American Revolution. Here we see the protest crowds for the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was one of the most protested taxes in the pre-revolutionary colonies in the 1700s. In this image, we can see the crowds holding an effigy of a Stamp Act tax collector. Taxes like this led to a lot of colonist discontent and fostered revolt among them. In this slide, we see another event that led to even more discontent among the colonists. This is the Boston Massacre, and it happened in front of what is the Old State House today on March 5th, 1770. 5 people were killed when British soldiers fired into an unruly, unarmed crowd. Though the soldiers were put on trial, they were ultimately found not guilty for murder. Here we see General George Washington leading a charge in a battle during the American Revolution. Note the different types of soldier in the Army. There are militiamen holding farming tools as weapons and mounted officers such as George Washington. Awesome. So it seemed to be working pretty well. It seems to be, the narration and the time were pretty on spot. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 in there that started a little early, but that's the cool thing about doing Scratch is that you can really refine it and make it yours and really personalize your project. And if you want to as well, if you look here on the control side, if you want to keep looping and keep on going forever and ever, you can grab this block and you can place all of your commands for your project in here, and it'll keep looping. You're going to have to probably do that as well for the section on top. So if you wanted to keep playing over and over and over again, this is how you would do it. You would just get the forever block and move it over here and place it on the outside of all of these. And again, all I did was I take this out. All right, and all I did was grab the forever block and put the entire thing inside of it. I can also do the repeat if I want to repeat just 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or 20 or 10,000 times. I can do it right here using the repeat block. So that's the slow and skinny of making a history digital slideshow. Scratch narrative slideshow using Scratch and using the American Revolution and using history. And again, it's not limited to just history. You can do this with essentially any type of lesson if you want, and you can incorporate other different, commands. And my suggestion to you is to go in and get your hands dirty, play around with some of the controls. Your homework is essentially doing the same thing as this. But again, where you're free to play around with it and add in some bells and whistles if you like, but really try and don't be afraid of Scratch. Again, it won't break.
Before we get into the specifics of the homework, I just wanted to show you one more example of something very similar. So I just want to show you a different example that could be applied more like a sciencey concept. This is another slideshow that we didn't make it. This was a public Scratch project that we just found online. But this one is basically just a slideshow of flowers. And you can see that it has a little transition effect in there. You could play with that as well if you have extra time or if you want to try something else that we hadn't covered yet. It's under the looks menu. You're more than welcome to try it out. But this is, again, just a quick slideshow with just flowers. So you could do something like this with any topic. Doesn't have to be a history-related theme. I'm going to stop that for now. And going back to my other screen. So the homework is going to be 2 parts. One is going to be an exit ticket, which is a very, very short survey just asking you, what you learned and what else we can do. The second piece is the more important piece, which is the assignment. It's to create a slideshow using at least 4 different backdrops and sound. So it's very similar to what Nick did. So you can follow step by step what Nick had done in the video. And again, you can watch the video as many times as you'd like by going to the same YouTube link. And after you're done, we'd like you to submit the URL of the project via Google Classroom. And before you do that, you're going to have to share your project in Scratch. Did you share that?
I didn't show.
Okay, maybe we'll show you. So we'll show you how to share in a minute.
It's really easy.
Sorry. And just some additional ideas. So if you're doing a social studies or history-related project, you can do something like historical event, just like Nick did. It could be a biography. You could talk about a historical artifact. English language arts, you could retell a story, or you could create your own story. Science could be plant cycle, butterfly cycle, any type of scientific cycles, or you could talk about weather, or you could talk about different flowers and plants. And then with math, you can do things like shape, place values, fractions, or any other topic of your choice. If you need help, you can reach us from email or Google Classroom comment section anytime. And we also have office hours where we specifically will be available. So office hours typically will be on Thursdays, but because this Thursday is a holiday, we're going to do it on Friday instead. We will be available online from 3:30 to 5. You can email us or just send us a Google chat or something, and we'll be available that way. Or if you want to meet face-to-face, Nick will be in the first floor lobby of the bowling building between 4 to 5.
Right. In front of Dudley Doe.
Yes, in front of Dudley Doe. We'll make sure he's easily recognizable.
Yes, I'll have a sign. And maybe a hat.
Yes. Or if you want to explore on your own, go into the wiki, Scratch Wiki site, and they have great resources there as well. Just some final thoughts. Make sure you plan before you begin. So plan out your project, have all the pictures ready, have a narration ready. Make sure you test as you go. So it's always a good practice to test little pieces of code before you make your entire project, which I guess this week we kind of did our own the entire project, but it's better to test small pieces at a time. So for example, in today's project, maybe you would test just switching the background before you start doing the sound, or just because it's easier to troubleshoot a smaller piece of code than a whole big blown full-blown project. The other tip is there are usually multiple ways to get something done. So even if you don't exactly follow Nick's way, if it seems to be doing the right thing, it's probably fine. Computers are not very smart. They only do what you tell it to do. So if it's not doing what you think it should be doing, there's probably a reason for that. So don't, if you program something and if it's not working the way you think it should be working, don't be like, oh, it's an error. Most likely it's not. So just there usually is a reason inside your code. So look really carefully. If you're having trouble finding errors, we could definitely help you with that. You could share the project with us or just send us a screenshot or something and we can work through errors, so don't worry about that. And finally, don't be afraid. Scratch will not break. The worst thing that could happen is that your program may do something really weird, but you're not gonna have like a system breakdown. So don't be afraid, feel free to play around, try different blocks. And again, you can always go to the wiki if you need a reference or ask us for if you have questions. Even if it's something that we haven't covered yet, we'd be happy to help you with that. So we talked about the digital literacy and computer science standards being in draft state, and we're looking for feedback. We're having a session here at Bowling next week from 5 to 7, which is right after this webinar. So you're welcome to come to the feedback session. We will post a link for the registration in the Google Classroom so that anybody interested can come. We're definitely looking for feedback from people like you who are teaching things like this in the classroom. And this is something that will impact your work going forward, so we definitely encourage you to take a look. And even if you can't come to our feedback session, you can submit feedback on your own through the link shown on this slide.
Let's come back here. So it's really easy to share. So first thing you do is just come to this button, press share, and now you're shared. Pretty simple, pretty easy. And the way you share a project is just grab, this is your URL, this is your link that connects directly to your project. You edit it, and you press copy, and you insert it or paste it wherever you'd like. And that's very, again, simple, easy. It's shared. If you don't see a shared button here on the right side, that means your project is shared. However, you need to unshare it. I will go to my folder. Okay. And again, events leading to the American Revolution. I come here, and I just press unshare. That's how you unshare it. And again, if you need to share it again, it'll take you back to your project, and it's right here. So share, and use this URL, and you're good to go. So if anybody has any questions on today's meet, let us know. We're not seeing any right now. Do you see any, Hermana?
I don't see any. One little comment. I just posted the assignments in Google Classroom, and the specific instructions for how to submit a link as an assignment in Google Classroom is on there. So there's a one-pager explaining how to submit a link. So if you have any trouble submitting the assignment to us, just let us know. You can even submit by email if you really have trouble, but the instructions are on the Google Classroom site. Okay. Sorry for going over time. Thank you for joining us.
And we hope you had a good session. We hope you learned something. Okay, so we'll see you guys next week. It was a great session. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next session, next week.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you for tuning into our webinar. If you learned something new, give us a thumbs up or leave a comment down below in the comment section. If you're looking for more videos, click on one of the videos on the left side of the screen or explore our YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe.